great, but especially early on back in 2005, it's like this is something new. And one of the things that when I got my master's degree, I mean, I had this background in exercise science. I worked as a strength and conditioning coach, and I really didn't know after that point what I was going to do for a living. And I think there's a lot of people out there, like you said, you were thinking about coaching and different aspects going down the rehab route. When I got my master's, we had people going back to PT school or going to get their PhD so they could be a professor. And but there wasn't a lot of, if you want to say, practical application tools or that you can basically apply in the exercise and exercise science world. And so I think there's a lot of people that have come through this program that's what they were doing. They were looking and trying to figure out what they want to do. And I think that would be the key is how did this impact your decisions and how you move forward from that point?
Yeah, that's a really good question too, because I mean, the idea of being a practitioner, when I went to college, I didn't know that the fitness industry as a whole existed. I thought everything revolved around sports. I spent my time with athletes. I'm in the weight room with the football guys, the basketball guys, and the track guys. And, that was what I did. And my dad always told me, dude, you better get something to do with your hands because you can't sit still. There's no way anybody's going to let you work in an office. There's, just limited amount of things that you can do. And we were passionate around movement. I mean, playing multiple sports at high levels. I was just always on the go, but nobody even really knew the fitness industry and personal training existed until it started to get big in the 90s. And I remember trying to find the answer always. When I got into this club system early on in my career, I was reading the Paul Checks, the Juan Carlos Santanas, and everybody that was big back in the heyday, right? And Gary Gray Cook. And so my background was pointing me all to these, movement analysis people, but everybody had this idea that stretching was the solution. And, range of motion, without having range of motion, you're not going to be able to get anybody where they want to be in terms of performance or pain-free. And I remember sitting in clubs with certain clients in my head, and I got little old ladies, I got high school basketball players, and all of them, I would do certain things with PNF stretching. And sometimes I'd watch the range of motion just open up on movements. And sometimes then I'd do another like passive or static stretch and the range of motion would go down. And I'm like, there's no way that this is supposed to be happening. And when I finally got in front of you at that internship, I was all geeked out. I had my goniometer, I had my computer. I'm like, I'm ready to go. What's this guy going to teach me that NASM already didn't? I mean, there's got to be something, right? And as I was sitting there, I had still not seen those MAT sessions, and I started drilling you with questions, and you probably don't remember me other than who is this peon? Oh yeah, who does this guy think he is asking me these questions? At one point, I think you got frustrated with my questions and said, all right, come on up and I'll show you. And I was like, I've had SI joint dysfunction since I was like 15 years old. I'm like, I've tried everything and, I still got pain all the time. And I said, I could look at a crack in the road and sidewalk and sprain my ankle. And you're like, well, let's test everything to make sure it works. And I went, test what? How are you going to do this? And you started testing the hamstrings and gastrocs. And you're like, all that stuff seems pretty good. You're like, well, let's see what kind of range of motion you got in your hips. And you flip me over. We do a hip extension range test. My left side comes up like 2 degrees off the table. And my right side comes up like a good full 20. And you're like, you got weak glutes. And I'm like, what do you mean I got weak glutes? I squat 405 for reps, right? You tested something and my leg fell down to the table and I looked back at you and I was like, what did you just do to me? You treated all the divisions of the glutes, then checked the range of motion again. And I was sold at that point. The first time I had a weak test and something got strong, all of a sudden I was like, hold on. I have something that I'm missing right now. Nobody in university taught me this. Nobody in any other program for certification taught me this. What are you doing and how can I do it? Mm-hmm. At that point, it was revolutionary to me because I thought that I was scouring everything I possibly could from, I had Kendall and Kendall's book on my shelf. I had anything else that I could get my hands on. And I was like, this is different. this is going to change what I do, and it's going to make an impact. So I think that was that foray into, well, if you're going to jump into a dance floor, you better jump onto the dance floor and look like you mean to be there.
Yeah, and that's probably the key too, and the selling point for myself when I was putting it all together. I mean, obviously I was applying it on my athletes that I was working with at the time, and but the day I had a guy that was working for me, I had him working through, and we'd practice, and I'd have him apply the principles on me, and every specialist out there, you named all the names, from Gary Gray to Gray Cook to Paul Check. I mean, I learned from all the names all the big names out there in every field: physical therapy, chiropractic, podiatry, all fields. And the common denominator was you're tight, and all your problems that you have are related to this tightness. And the day that I had this guy working with me, we worked the abdominal muscles because I could barely bend down to touch my knees, let alone my toes. We got all the hip flexors and abdominal muscles activated, and I bent down and touched my toes for the first time in 10 years. And it was great because then I knew I was on to something. And because nothing else, one, it provided that short-term effect, but more than anything, from that point forward, I never stretched or got deep tissue work or anything like that to try and release tissues, and I never lost the range of motion. If, especially to the degree where I couldn't touch my knees, let alone my toes. So I never lost that range of motion. And that told me that we were going down the whole different path, and tightness was just a symptom. And to some other underlying cause, which now we know as MAT, is the underlying weakness is what causes that protective tightening. And so it was neat at one point in time thinking that I was the only one doing it. And it's neat now to see thousands of people have come through this program over the last 20 years. And now kind of evolving, you've been one of the instructors that have helped to get many of these students trained in the technique. And so really, if you want to expand on that and how it went from MAT to master level, RX level, and then your experience of being an instructor and how the impact on your career that way.
Yeah. Starting as a specialist, you bounce back to that time where I got certified. I'm thinking, all right, I'm doing this. There's no way around the fact that I'm not going to just jump wholeheartedly into this process. And I thought, man, by the time 2010 had come around, I'd probably taken the mastery foot course like 4 subsequent years. And I remember the days when we'd have 125 people jammed into a hotel conference room, and there's 6, 8, 10 assistants running around trying to help. And all you hear across the room, Greg. And we were all just trying to get as much information as we possibly could to try to improve. And, you know, taking mastery courses on a repetitive basis to constantly try to refine what I was doing, I think was one of those catalysts into, well, dude, if I can use this and I can be productive with it, I got to be able to help other people understand it. And I'd been teaching in the industry for Bob Esqueri, since the early 2000s. And I was teaching inside of club systems where I put in personal training programs and as, profit centers. And we developed a series of workshops, and we had MAT as one of those foundational principles. And I thought, instead of having one of those instructors come in all the time, I'm like, I got to jump into this, and I got to talk to Matt and Greg about what is the way that I can help other people learn. And a process was laid out for me. Well, you go be an assistant, and if you're good at taking information and helping students figure it out, then we'll look at having you do some assistant teaching. I jumped into the assistant teaching with a few different instructors at the time, and at that point, they all cleared me and said, all right, it's time for you to go. And I think I taught my first series of Jumpstart courses on my own at the beginning of 2013. So you're talking almost, 9 years ago at this point. And I remember taking those students, and I'd heard the information so many times that I thought it was just something that, was constantly coming out of my mouth. There's no way that I couldn't get it right to have them try to help people. But, just as I think with any tool, if you've not used that tool yourself as an instructor, I had to figure out, how do I get my information across? So I was always, whether I'm driving around or whether it was listening to other instructors teach or you teach along the way, I was always trying to take that information so I could help somebody go to their practice on Monday morning after they came in to hear me give them information so they could go make a positive impact on their community. And I think if you're doing this all by yourself over the course of the last 20 years, there's a finite number of people that you can reach. So the idea of us taking information that we wholeheartedly would believe in so we can actually get that out to other people is really, really important to me. So the better we could take your words and elocute those words so other people could actually hear that information. I mean, you're spreading your army, right, at that point. And if this is something that you thoroughly believed, and I trusted in you, and I trusted the fact that if you could make an impact with me and my practice and my community, I had to reach out and do the same thing.
Yeah, that's great. And it's an evolution. I mean, probably the key to even that, the development of education, and you as an instructor, is when I taught the first class, I never knew there was going to be master level. I never knew there was going to be RX, and so we had this 10-month certification program that basically went through the ability to test and treat every muscle in the body and related to limitations and range of motion, and had great amount of success with that. And then you realize that I mean, just from the examples you used with your SI joint dysfunction and the glutes being weak, I mean, that's just one issue. And myself with my abdominals and hip flexors and being able to bend down and touch my toes, it was, I mean, from an athletic and performance standpoint, these were huge factors. And the interesting part is I was working with athletes this whole time. And then all of a sudden, everyone wants to send you when you help somebody, they want to send you their problem client and or a family member. And next thing you know, you're dealing with these neurological issues on people that, I mean, are far beyond the basic biomechanical principles that we know and we understand. And I always say that, I mean, you add a immune system and a nervous system, this biomechanical system, you literally can throw everything you know about biomechanics out the door. And that goes back to even your early on relationship with Tom Purvis. Tom Purvis has been a huge advocate of MAT, and you talked about the exercise industry. Tom owned that industry. He ran that industry. He was a biomechanic specialist, still is. I mean, but he was out there, I mean, presenting all his information, and RTS was just having a huge impact on trainers and the ability to apply exercise and understand how to apply forces on people's bodies. And one of the things as we first met that he saw is, wow, even though everything makes sense biomechanically, when you add this nervous system and immune system to this biomechanical system, some of the principles that we understand about biomechanics don't make sense anymore. And I started seeing that more and more as I had these clients that had more neurological issues, or what I would call a sensitive clients with disease states and health issues. And all of a sudden it's like now they have more variables that make it so it's not as straightforward of you treat the muscle, you activate it, increase range of motion, and all their pain goes away. All of a sudden it got more complicated. And that led to, I mean, developing in the master level to start creating more of a thought process and fine-tuned skills on our practitioner, to the whole evolution of the RX process, which I always say is like a total body overhaul, where you actually start from square one and build from the foundation and get stability at the core and work out through the extremities. And literally, as people age and become more and more dysfunctional, we can say that all the aches and pains that we relate to aging have to do with failure of the muscle system to be able to tolerate force. And so these people need an overhaul. And so all of this evolved because of experience. And I think with the 15 years of experience that you have with MAT, I mean, like you said, you went from the specialist level and all the way to the RX level, and you see things, and you still see things that confuse you or are complicated. And as clients walk in the door, and you see amazing things. I mean, I've seen so many different changes in people's lives that go far beyond just the basic biomechanical principles that I thought this program was designed for. And so off of that, I guess I would say, with all your experience, what can you name one or talk about one situation or one client that just probably had the most profound and rewarding effects on? Because that's what this whole process is about, is being helping. And what would you be able to portray as your most rewarding experience that you had in applying these principles on your clients?
Wow. I think that would be very challenging to narrow it down to one, but to talk about somebody that has autoimmune type issues and emotional traumas, physical abuse traumas, a gal that came to me in her early 60s, sat down in my office about 4 years ago and looked at me and said, "I need to work with you." And I'd listened to one of my trainers talk with her about what she was doing. And, you know, I said, "There's no reason why she's got to work with me." And the first time that I sat with her, I was like, "Linda, there's nothing that you have going on right now from a trauma, like an experience standpoint, that says one of my other people can't help you." And she looked at me and said, "No, trust me, I got this feeling that I need to work with you. I need to be with somebody that has refined everything and has a lot of experience because I got issues." And I said, "What do you mean you got issues?" So I got her actually on the table that day and I started testing some things, checking range of motions. And there wasn't anything that was strong. And you look at most 62-year-old women that walk through the door and they seem relatively fit. She worked with a trainer a few times a week, and there was nothing that this woman could do. The integrity of her muscular system as a whole was so beat up. And she worked with chiropractors, worked with people that were doing, natural health stuff. And I started her in an RX process as quickly as I could because the system integrity that she had was so low. And I was dabbling with HRV stuff probably 2016, 2017. And it's kind of funny that we talk about heart rate variability as your immune system's potential, or your autonomic nervous system's ability to potentially recover and tolerate disease states and stressful situations. And I remember doing an HRV on her early on as well. And she had this HRV that was just god awful low. And we've worked with her now once a week consistently over the last 4 years. And she's back to the point where she's going out for 4 or 5 mile hikes. She had a hard time walking into the gym to get started, and it was 100 feet in the gym, right? There were times where she'd get up off the table and walk around and be like, something's still not right. And I'd be like, "Man, I just treated everything here and I did this." And I would get a text message from her 30 minutes later, "I got to come back in. I'm still not right." And I'm thinking the whole time, what did I miss? Right. And I'd check through, things with an RX process. And then I'd be like, I'm not missing something. And then she'd get back in through the door and patterns 1, 2, and 3 were gone again. And I'm like, what? Apparently I'm horrible at this, or your system is so bad, or you don't want to project it on the client, but I'm like, damn it. So I'd have to go back through and I'd have to treat pattern 1 again after I just did 1, 2, 3 in an hour. And this woman has got to the point now where 5 mile hike, she comes back in and was like, "Hey man, I was on a retreat. I led a group of girls walking around, and we hiked Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And I hiked at least 5 miles a day right now." And I'm thinking, do you realize that 4 years ago when you came to me, you couldn't walk out the door without being in pain? Now you're walking out and leading people in retreats and missions. And I'm like, there's just something crazy about this. And her heart rate variability, we talked about this through some text the other day. Pattern 1 is so linked to, the autonomic nervous system function and respiratory function. I mean, this lady's heart rate variability is that of a 25-year-old professional athlete right now. Her heart rate variability and her morning readiness checks is typically in the mid 70s. One of the NeuroPeak gals sent me a text message the other day because she's coaching both of us and said, we're talking about this lady in our team meeting and we're just dumbfounded the changes that she's seen even in the last 4 or 5 months since she started doing this. And like, she's just dialed in. And, when you talk about this being an integrated system and, the sum of the parts is only as good as its weakest link. And the better we are at doing our job, the better all the other systems seem to, tie in together. And we have this ability to, make it such a positive impact on a life. And, if you ask me that question, I could sit and tell you story upon story upon story, whether or not they're kids that are playing professional football, professional tennis, golfers, or little old ladies that are coming in wheelchairs. And I'm helping them get onto the table at the beginning of sessions and them forgetting that, 6 months later, they're walking in with a cane. And then all of a sudden they walk in with their cane. And at the end of the session, they walk out to their car and forget that their cane is there. And I have to run out and hand them their cane. Right. So story upon story like this, I don't think there's just one person, but I have many of those Lindas that I get to see on a weekly basis, and people that will put their trust in you because there's something so foundationally sound about the principles that we get to use. And the better we get at utilizing those tools on a daily basis, the more profound those impacts that we get to have on our community.
Yeah, and I think that's the greatest key as you tell that story. It's all about force tolerance. And I have a client I'm working with right now who is coming in. She's been a little challenging after 4 or 5 years of chronic back pain and going down every route through the medical world to try and address it. And so 4 to 5 years of being in chronic pain and dysfunction, the tolerance levels are very low. And so you start to see progress, and they can walk out. And like you said, you got patterns working and they're activated, they leave stronger, but then they go and put forces on their body. And if the tolerance levels are low, you exceed the tolerance levels, negative things happen. The body first sign of muscle weakness is tightness, and the second sign is pain. And so it's getting people educated that, even this woman is, this is probably the only thing in the big picture that's going to help her. Like, she wants to get back golfing and doing the things she used to be able to do that she hasn't been able to do for 4 or 5 years. And it'd be a shame if she stopped in the process, because we're starting to actually see progress. We're now in the facility. I have her swinging a golf club, and the first day I was like, ooh, maybe I shouldn't have had her do that, because from the first swing on, it just brought out some pain. And the last time she was in, it was like, okay, she's doing this pretty well now. And she's breaking herself down doing it, but it wasn't the amount of pain that she was having like she did the first time. And it's things like that it's a process, just like exercise with the people with the real low tolerance levels. But the example you're using is perfect. This woman would leave and she'd come back 3 hours later, and everything you treated had to be retreated. And now 4 or 5 years, you said, that she's doing things she couldn't do and probably never expected to do in her life. And that's the nice thing about this process is and even how you said it affects every other aspect of life and health. If I always believe with MAT is, if there was ever a true anti-aging process, this is it. Because when muscles can tolerate force, it increases, metabolic activity, oxygen transport, nutrients transports to cells, can reduce overall inflammation because the body's not in a chronic stress state, and can help the body heal. And those examples, that's a great thing when you can sit there and say, I can't give you one example. I have many that people are coming in and seeing these type of results. And that's why we're here. I think that's everybody's goal if you're working in the medical or exercise field, is to try and help people. And I think that's the rewarding part about this process, is being able to help people. And you have people that frustrate you because they don't respond as quickly or as well as you would hope. But again, it's a process, and getting people to commit to the process. I think we can say that, I mean, most people do well, or they do better than they did when they first started coming, if they stick with the process. And I think that's a neat component also. And so in summary, I guess I'd say, I mean, what do you feel this has done as a whole for your career as starting in the exercise industry? And what do you think MAT has brought to your career? And would you recommend it to other people that are looking for making an impact on people's lives?
Yeah, and in dabbling with so many different other things, I've thought about going back to PT school, thought about going back to chiropractic school. I had one client back in the early 2000s that wanted to support me and send me to become an orthopedic surgeon. And this was right at the time where I was starting an internship. And I would have not have known at that point that I could have had such a profound effect on people, because exercise by itself, I was having great success with. But this put me into a situation where today, I feel kind of like where you've said in the past, I think I'm strong enough fundamentally today with the tools of MAT because I've invested myself so much in getting better and better at refining each of the pillars that we utilize, that I think I can dig myself out of almost any hole with somebody. And I can try things and do things today because I spent so much time getting good at them and, thinking through the Lindas of, holy crap, I messed this up and let's get better at it. But the whole idea of knowing that this was going to exist when I watched you, 15, 16 years ago in Columbus was well beyond my imagination. And I'm at the point now where I use teaching sometimes as a way to recruit people to use that tool for our practice. And I've got several clients then now of our practice as a whole that have even come through and gone through a specialist program, and we've hired those people as well. So the idea of it just not being a tool that I can utilize, but I believe in it strongly enough that I want to grow a team to impact our community to be as healthy as they possibly can, is what I would, kind of leave you with, thinking that if I think it's good for me, that's great. But if I'm ready to change our whole community by educating an army of practitioners, I think that the people that we can make an impact on is going to actually be that small step that will change the whole world. So if I have somebody that's anywhere remotely interested in going into that allied health field, I would much stronger or much more conscientiously urge them towards MAT than I would going in another direction. Not that those other tools are bad. I just think that this is such a powerful tool that we don't have really any choice other than to spread it.
Yeah. And that's neat. I mean, in summary, that's really the direction of MAT at this point is, I mean, it's a powerful tool. I don't believe that I don't know of another modality out there that's, actually designed to, make you stronger, improve your ability to tolerate forces as you age, to help reduce pain and take away dysfunction. And so the goal, it doesn't discredit anything else. I got hired in pro sports being a range of motion functional movement guy. I was focusing on trying to increase people's mobility through stretching and deep tissue work and different modalities that I had learned through early in my career. And so it doesn't minimize anything else that's being done, because I had success all the way, to get me hired in pro sports. But it was focusing on the people that weren't getting better, or the more challenging people, or even being able to speed up the process. Someone sprains an ankle and it could be a 3 to 4 week process. And I've had people come in on crutches and being able to walk out without their crutches. And you can speed up the process of healing. And so seeing that it's an adjunct to every field, from chiropractic to physical therapy to massage to exercise, is an adjunct to what these practitioners work with. It can help benefit what they do and speed up the process. It's not working against anybody, it's working with everybody, and to try and get the optimal results for the clients. And for that reason, I've always felt there's a place for MAT. And like you said, with the experiences that we have, we believe that MAT needs to be in every corner of every city, of every state, and every country, because it has such a powerful impact on the integrity of people's neuromuscular system. And so I think you're being an instructor, and I know you're in agreement with that process, that our goal with MAT is to get the word out and get people. I mean, we've refined our education programs where we brought in Broadview University and created degreed programs, and able to apply and teach people, especially in today's world, through online learning and less travel and less commitment to having to be in Denver or the city of an internship. I mean, we've done everything where we're the specialists in the muscle system through MAT, and we brought in specialists that, they're the specialists in the education system, and now we feel like we have that vehicle to be able to most effectively teach students how to make a career out of this process. And through the help of you and our other instructors, Aaron, this is, I know we're all on the same page, and we want to make this grow and see it everywhere because we believe in it. And so thank you for all you've done as a student, as an instructor, as a colleague. Thank you for everything. We've had in-depth conversations over the years, and thank you for all your input and insight, and just being involved in the process and being a part of MAT.
I appreciate it. And we appreciate your leadership in the community and the industry, because we got a lot of work yet to do.
All right. Well, thank you very much. And
cheers.
Cheers.